समझ अपनी भाषा में ही आता है, कंटेंट आपकी भाषा में ओनली ऑन डेली हंट। हमें पता है आपको क्या चाहिए, अपनी पसंद का कंटेंट ओनली ऑन डेली हंट। रखो अपने एरिया की खबर, लोकल अपडेट्स ओनली ऑन डेली हंट।
We're delighted to welcome you to the 14th Jaipur Literature Festival protected by Dettol from the Darbar Hall of Diggy Palace. Our session today is partnered by European Union. It is our pleasure to present Two Blankets, Three Sheets, Rodaan Al Galidi and Jonathan Reeder in conversation with Neeta Gupta. Two Blankets, Three Sheets is Rodaan Al Galidi's autobiographical account of spending 9 years as an asylum resident in the Netherlands. He tells us of how he reached Amsterdam airport in 1998, flushed away his documentary links with Iraq and hoped to build a new life as an honorable refugee. What he encountered instead was a brutal institutionalization and minimal facilities that he shared with 500 others while waiting for the precious documents of acceptance by the host country. Bizarre though the situation was, Al Galidi managed to find dark humor in the excessive scrutiny of his case. The author is accompanied by Jonathan Reeder, translator of Two Blankets, Three Sheets from Dutch to English. Reeder enjoys a dual career in translation and music. His translation of Rivers by Martin Michael won the 2016 ECI Literature Prize. In conversation with Rodaan Al Galidi and Jonathan Reeder is Neeta Gupta, the publisher of Yatra Books, who has been working with translation as a bridge between cultures. Rodaan Al Galidi is a writer of Iraqi descent. He studied as an engineer in Iraq before fleeing to escape military service, arriving in the Netherlands in 1998. However, his request for asylum was rejected, and since he was not allowed to follow the official courses of Dutch language, he taught himself the language and started writing. In 2007, Al Galidi was one of the people to benefit from the general pardon given by the Dutch Parliament to asylum seekers arriving before 2001, and he still lives in the country. Jonathan Reeder, a native of New York and a long-time resident of Amsterdam, enjoys a dual career as a literary translator and performing musician. Alongside his work as a professional bassinet, he translates opera and essays on classical music as well as contemporary Dutch fiction by authors including Peter Bovalda, Bram de Hoek, Christine Othen and Rodaan Al Galidi. Neeta Gupta is the publisher at Yatra Books and a literary consultant with a special emphasis on translations. She is also the editor of Bharatiya Anuvad Parishad's quarterly journal on translation Anuvad. Please do remember to comment and ask questions by typing it in the comment section. Ladies and gentlemen, we now present Two Blankets, Three Sheets. Rodaan Al Galidi and Jonathan Reeder in conversation with Neeta Gupta.
Thank you so much, Kritika. Thank you for that warm introduction. And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Jaipur Literature Festival's virtual Darbar Hall. I'm here in this virtual Darbar Hall with Rodaan Al Galidi, the Dutch writer of Iraqi descent, and Jonathan Reeder, who's a Dutch translator of American descent. So we have two, wonderful people here with us today. Rodaan, of course, as Kritika just told us, is the EU Prize-winning author whose application to asylum to Netherlands was famously rejected the same year that he won the European Union Prize for Literature. So Rodaan, we will be speaking about your fictional account of an asylum seeker, which is clearly sort of inspired by your own experiences. It's titled Two Blankets, Three Sheets. And this book has recently been translated into English by Jonathan Reeder. So Rodaan, to begin with you, I wanted to understand the circumstances that drove you to write this heartbreaking story. And, also to tell us a little bit about your conflicting relationship with your Dutch identity. And also, I'm going to make this a very large question, so you have a lot of work you can, sort of address a lot of issues. Like, for instance, was there any challenges in publishing this book? Were there censorship that you faced, or any, request to dilute the narrative in some way? So, given that you were telling a very difficult story, so Rodaan, over to you. Tell us about this book, about what was, behind, in your mind when you wrote it, and why you wanted to, and you felt compelled to share this story. Rodaan.
Uh, Thank you very much. I didn't want to tell the story. I didn't want to write it actually. I just want to go further than my staying in the refugees camp. But once I was with the poet Angie Krug from South Africa, and with the very famous Dutch writer Adriaan van Dis in Turkey, in kind of reading we had there. And Adriaan van Dis, he asked me about my life in the refugees camp. I said to him, I don't want to tell about that. He said, no, you should write a book. I said, no way. He said to me, can you send me every month a story? Even one word is enough. And this man, he followed me more than 3 years. Every month I sent him kind of email. Hello, Adriaan, do you remember last month when I told you about this person? This month, I don't want to tell you about him because I will get crazy, but I will tell you another. It was like that. When I finished the story, he said to me, throw my name from the book and throw this kind of letters between me and you and send it to your publisher. And then when you read the book, you feel I didn't wrote it for people. It just is just kind of talking between two persons. Somebody told somebody, but it was really like that. That was the story, and I'm very thankful for Adriaan van Dis, because he gave me the energy to go on to write this very heavy story of me, of my life in the refugees camp. It's also not just the life in the refugees camp. I thought I will tell him about why I ran away from Iraq, where I was before I arrived to Holland. That was why I wrote the book.
Wonderful. In fact, there is, in the book, what I found was there is this very harsh reality that you present, but with a very dark sense of humor. At no point does the reader doesn't ever feel the heaviness that you, of course, we understand what you went through, but there is a kind of a light, a dark sense of humor with which you treat, even the most difficult situations. So, would you like to talk about, some of the influences, like your literary influences?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
you mentioned, I think one of the things that you mentioned, and we'll talk about others, like you mentioned reading Tagore in Arabic while growing up. In the book, you also mentioned Gandhi. So, there must have been some kind of influences that you were working, and when you thought of writing, and even language, for instance. So, if you could talk about, some of that
Uh,
before we move.
let we talk about the refugees in general. Before the Second World War, the Jewish people want to run away to Canada. But Canada said, no way, we don't want them. And Prime Minister Zai once, one is too many. Even one refugee is too much for Canada. Can you imagine the situation? If not just one coming, but hundreds a day or thousands. And when I ran away from Iraq, I was in Turkey, I was in Jordan and Thailand. Everywhere you are welcome when you are tourist or student or a businessman. And everywhere you are not welcome when you are refugees. Refugees means you are not a human. You need this very stupid paper. They call it passport to be human when you are outside your country. In your country, you need a good system, your dignity, maybe your weapon to make your freedom, or your diploma to make a good life. But when you leave your country 5 centimeters even the border, you need the passport. If you have not the good one, you are not good a human. If you have it not at all, you are not a human anymore. And I thought, to tell the story about refugees, it is very dramatic. And when you laugh very much, you have tears. But when you cry, you have tears. I thought I want the tears of the reader, but from laughing, not from crying. And I thought I want to tell every dramatic happiness in the book in 5 sentences, but the stupid happiness is in 10 pages. Otherwise, I will lose the reader in the beginning of the book. That was.
Lovely. That's a wonderful reason, because it is a hard and difficult story. So coming to Jonathan, how did you get introduced to, to Rodin's work, and what inspired you to take on this translation? Because it's brilliant. The way you've done it is, it reads so easily. It's, in fact, we are going to listen to some of your translations when you read it out to us. But if you could tell us about what brought you to this book, and how did you take that call as a translator to work on this book?
Thank you. I think my first acquaintance with Rodaan was, of course, when he was doing publicity interviews and things for the original Dutch book, which was, by the way, entitled How I Found a Talent for Life. We decided to change the title for the English version. I'll tell you about that later. But I first saw Rodaan on TV, and I saw him as a real personality, as a very outgoing, funny person. And that's the first impression that he wants to give in the book as well. As Rodaan just said, the way to get the tears from the reader is through the amusing anecdotes. And that was my first impression of the book as well when I read it. The publisher World Editions approached me to consider translating it. And then when you read a book with the prospect of translating it, you read it very differently than just as a weekend book enthusiast. So then you very shortly read between the lines. So very soon after, you start reading between the lines of the comic anecdotes and all the very funny people that he describes that he lives with, and even reading the lines themselves. It's there in black and white what Rodaan and all these other people and all refugees or asylum seekers, immigrants go through, and what he very colorfully describes the dehumanizing of these people. I mean, I think Holland is probably less cruel than some other places where you might end up as a refugee, but reading it does open your eyes to a very sad fact. Truth is that the doors that can open to a person are very arbitrary, and it depends on that piece of paper that you have, whether you have it or not, and whether it's the right piece of paper. The doors that open to you also depend on your national origin, perhaps I'm sorry to say, the color of your skin, maybe your background and the reasons, the circumstances that you left your country, and not always because of your worth as a human being and the reason that you're asking for asylum in the first place. So I think being amused and entertained by this book very quickly turned to being discomforted by the sad facts, the stark facts, and then a bit of shame at being part of that system, because I found a different door to come into this country than Rodaan did, not because of anything I did right or wrong. It was just that arbitrariness. So the shame, and then the shame turns into a little bit of outrage. And I think that's what most people who read this book also experience. The Dutch people who read the original and the English-speaking people who have read the translation. By the end of it, they're more outraged than entertained. But he reaches that through very comical anecdotes.
In fact, when you mentioned that, I think it'd be wonderful at this point if we could get a short reading and maybe, if you got the book there, we could even see the book, Jonathan, the translation
Here's
that you worked on. Wow, two blankets, three sheets. And
and
we'll talk about this title as well. But if you could give us a flavor of, because we're talking about the way, the way he tells this story, if you could give us a little flavor before we proceed with the next question, it'll be, uh, I think it will be interesting for our audience.
Okay. Now, Rodaan describes how he's already told us that he was in the asylum center or in various asylum centers in Holland for 9 years in total. And if you read the book and total it all up, you also realize that he was on the run for 7 years before that. So this is somebody who spent 16 years of his life on hold, really in limbo. So he writes a very moving passage about time. Time. At first, an asylum seeker counts the days he's spent in the ASC. And when he gets tired of that, he counts the weeks, the months, and eventually the years. There were two ways to deal with time: forget it entirely, or to keep strict track of it. Whenever I bumped into my friends Jamal or Najat, I would ask them the age of their son Milad, to be reminded of how long I had been in the asylum center, because he was born the very same day I arrived. You always ask how old Milad is, but you never come to his birthday party, his mother said. So I started buying gifts and visiting Milad on his birthday. No one knew it was actually not a party at all for me, but a really depressing day, because it meant yet another year had gone by without being able to get on with my life. Little Milad had become the symbol of my waiting. It was like I could look my wait straight in the eyes. When Milad got a little older and began to understand the ways of the asylum center, our exchange would go as follows. Hey Milad, how old are you? Rather than answering my question, he told me what I really wanted to know. Another 3 months and 4 days and you'll have been here for 7 years. This little boy had been here his whole life. His father Jamal invited me to his room for Milad's 9th birthday party. Najat had bought a cake with a big 9 on it and taped a sheet of paper on the door with a bright yellow sun, also with a 9 on it. The room was packed with asylum seekers. Not wanting the whole asylum issue to overshadow Milad's birthday party, they just exchanged arrival dates, saying, I came 3 years before you were born, or I came here when you were 2. When it was my turn, I said I arrived on exactly the same day he was born, and everyone laughed. They thought I was joking. I laughed too, and told him it was true, but still no one believed me. Maybe because in the asylum center, jokes are better than reality.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's so touching. It's so, there's something. In fact, I was listening to one of the interviews that you'd done immediately after the publication of the English translation, in which Rodaan mentions the very unique story of how he thought of this novel, this book in his own mother tongue, which is Arabic, and wrote it in his adopted language, which is Dutch. And you read it in your adoptive language, which is Dutch, and translated it into your mother tongue, English. So, the kind of, the full circle that this story has taken, of moving, of thinking in a mother tongue and coming back into, the translator's mother tongue. So I think, if you could talk about, because language is interesting, because, Rodaan, you mentioned in your, in your first book, the one which won the EU prize, you talk about language and how words don't mean what they say. I mean, that translation of that novel has not yet come out, but I've read some excerpts, and there's a story, the artist and the carrier pigeon. Would you like to comment on this, on the issue of language and mother tongue, and and what it meant to you? Because as an asylum seeker, you could not learn Dutch, but you learned the language. You fought your way and you learned the language.
Yeah, look,
young teacher, Anne, who was the first teacher for Dutch. So, tell us about your language
I will tell you. I am not in good in Dutch, also not good in Arabic, and you hear that I am not good in English. Maybe I am the only writer on this planet. I have no mother tongue and not good language. And it look like I will compare myself not with Shakespeare, but with the footballer Messi. If Messi play volleyball, he can move very fast, but he cannot do what he can. I am like that in all the languages, you know. And what I like in the translating of Jonathan, that I read my book in a mother tongue.
Yeah.
In English, because it's the mother tongue of Jonathan. But in Dutch is not my mother tongue. I when I read it in Dutch, I don't feel it exactly. But in English, when I began to read it, I feel that the book
No.
he can tell his story very strong. Same Messi in the football, not in the football. We go back to Messi, and I'm very happy that Jonathan gave this possibility for me to read my book in a mother tongue.
Exactly, exactly.
And
So,
I can.
Jonathan, would you like to talk about this, and also how you translated the word play and the dark humor and the challenges, like for instance the misunderstandings that are there between the asylum seekers and the
Yeah.
social services, those things which come up again in your translations, and hopefully you can read something for us again. But this language thing, can you tell us, and
Yeah.
how you chose the title as well? So over
Okay.
to you, Jonathan.
Well, the thing about mother tongue is really is you can talk for hours just about where you feel the most comfortable. I've lived in the Netherlands for 30 years, and I sometimes wonder if I have a mother tongue anymore either. But um, what I did with Rodaan's book is, first of all, I have to say he was the dream author of every translator, because he said to me, "This is your book now. You take what I've written and you make it your book. It's not the Bible." And I give him a big hug through the Zoom connection, because that always makes me happy, and I think every translator would love an author to tell him that. But I think it was not only because he's so kind and he trusts me, but also because it would make the book sound like he just described, actually like a person, like I'm telling the story, like that person is telling the story in his mother tongue, and the person who reads it really will feel it that way. And one trick I used I think it's a trick, I guess, I didn't type it, I dictated it into the computer. And that way it really felt like I was telling a story and not sitting down with a serious piece of poetry and a literature to write it. It's a whole series of stories, and Rodaan is an excellent storyteller, and I thought the way to tell this story the best would be to actually verbally tell it. And that's where speaking in your mother tongue comes in really handy. So I think that really helped the story. As far as wordplay and humor goes, I think there were two possibilities. Either it translated itself because it was just something that you could take from the one language to the other, or it was going to be a real challenge because it required the reader to have some knowledge of either the Dutch language or of Dutch society. And I think I had to make certain choices. At a certain point, you have to maybe sneak in a sentence or two that explains what's going on, so that the reader will understand the Dutch wordplay. Like when they're in their classroom and they have a teacher who says she's the Dutch word is gastvrij, which means hospitable, welcoming. But they didn't. You don't know to listen for all the consonants, so they thought she said gasvrij, which means that she has no gas in her stomach, and that was a cause for great amusement among all the students. Well, that's kind of hard to translate, but it worked. I found a way to do it. I'll read something different now. And that has to do with the language that the asylum seekers spoke with each other, because of course the ASC, that's the short version of Asylum Seeker Center, the ASC has 500 people living in it, but they're all from different nationalities and backgrounds and levels of education, and so they have to communicate with each other, with one another, as well as with the Dutch people. So here's another passage. Making friends with Dutch people outside the ASC was impossible for asylum seekers because they rarely spoke Dutch well enough to make themselves understood. This is why asylum seekers taught the locals their own language, called asylum seekerese. This language is, in a nutshell, a few words of Dutch and a few words of English, all jumbled up and put back together in the grammar of the asylum seeker's mother tongue. Russian, Arabic, Romanian, Persian, Kurdish, Portuguese, Turkish, Somali, you name it. If an asylum seeker wants to say he saw an old man sitting in the grass, then you won't understand him if you don't speak asylum seekerese. Then you'll think he said, old grass with sitting man on gray hair, or old grass saw man sitting, or the sitting on an old man is grass. If you spend a week at an ASC and noted down everything you heard, you could publish a collection of modern poetry.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you. This is brilliant. In fact, I'd love to come back to some more questions on language and translations, and also. But Rodaan, I wanted to talk to you because we have a few minutes before we let the audience questions come in. So I wanted to talk to you about your life as an artist. I mean, there are so many lives you live as a poet, as an author. I also heard some Arabic poetry which you had set to music and performed online on a jazz platform, I think. So tell us about this year. How has this pandemic, this year been for you? What have you been? What were the kind of projects that you were able to do in this year when everybody sort of went into a lockdown, and it was a completely completely different time. So if you could tell us a little bit about the creative processes that you involved with in this year.
This Corona time make me a little bit more rich, because before the Corona, I need to travel very far away to feel I am free. I am as a bird, I am as a wave, all these poetic things in my mind to make me feel free. But when the lockdown coming, I began to discover I have a lot of books I never read, just I bought or I get. I had 3 guitars. I used just one. Why these 2? I must make them. And I discovered that there is a people around me in this 100 meters square or 300 I never met before, even because in my house now, a lot of noisy. I moved to somebody I just met because of the lockdown. And then after 9 o'clock, you are not allowed to walk outside just when you have a dog. I have now 3 dogs from people. They said, oh, Rodaan, can you walk with this? And I am walking now with the 3 dogs, This make you very more free. Even before the lockdown, I never think to walk outside because it's cold and dark. Now I am walking with the 3 dogs and I thought, my God, it's wonderful. The weather is not bad, but my clothes are bad. And I learned from the war in Iraq, you can change the situation in 1 second from very negative to very positive, from very poor to very rich. And I thought to myself, I want to change this to make me rich and positive. And now I live in the quarantine. And the people speak about they cannot hug each other or they cannot kiss each other. I am kissing all the nice women now from far away, because before I never thought to to look to them or to hug them. That make you, it's really in the mind. It work like that with me. If somebody want a dog and he see this program, he must call me. I have another dog for him.
That is, you are incredible. I think, there is so much to learn from you, and I'm sure we can continue talking, but there are now some audience questions coming in. So I'm going to talk about, I think there's Shrishti who says that there's a powerful metaphor that you've used in your writing, that wars and indeed nations treat asylum seekers as chemical waste. Could you talk about this? Could you say something on this? This is from Shrishti for Rodaan.
Yeah, it is. The people are. When I ran away from Iraq, I was a civil engineer. I play little bit guitar. I love music. I love all the literature from all the world. If you say India, I will say Tagore. If you say Italy, I say Dante Alighieri. I say Germany, I will say Goethe. America, William. It's all the word is my word. But then they didn't ask me who you are, but no, where are you coming from? Then the place, my place was my identity, but Iraq is chemical weapon, war, terror, and I began to be that person who very dangerous is because he's coming from that place. And that was really a strange experience of me. But I discovered one thing very nice. When you have nothing, no passport, no country, no ambassador helping you, no system, no money, very important. You know who help you? The people who have nothing. In Thailand, there is a very old woman selling rice and fish. She said to me, when the sun go down, you come. And she gave me what she didn't sell. Can you imagine this woman? He had nothing. She lived in very bad box. I was living because she gave me the food. But I spoke once with a French guy, very rich. And he said to me, how are you? I said, yes, good. I didn't eat for 2 days. I said, oh my God, this is really very hard. He never thought that I need maybe $5. I didn't ask him, I want money. But he never thought that I need that because he didn't feel it. He never felt hungry, you know? And that is what is nice when you travel, you discover the very poor people are the more rich people and the more human also. When they have nothing, they give everything. I don't know how I explain it, but it's like that.
That's a beautiful, I know that you've experienced it firsthand. So everything you tell in that book is it's painful, yet you say those stories with so much love. So from the audience questions, we have Soumya here asking, this is for Jonathan. I think Soumya is interested in translation, and she wanted to know, Jonathan, what made you begin your work as a translator, and what inspired you to take up this challenge of translating, and what was the most difficult part of actually becoming a professional translator?
Okay, well, as in a lot of things in life, it didn't happen from one day to the next, and it sort of happened before I realized that I was doing it. As a musician, I was a performing musician and still am, and I realized at a certain point that performing music and translating words are basically the same thing. It's basically the same activity. You read something that a composer or a musician has written down, and you interpret it for the rest of the world in your own voice. And it's the same thing with an author. And when I realized that, and I was always interested in writing and in literature, I never studied it. So I'm self-taught as a translator. I started doing the same thing and taking texts and putting them in English and how would it sound? How would it sound if I did it this way? Approaching it as though it were music. And I think that's one thing Rodaan and I also have in common is that we're both musicians as well, musicians and writers at the same time. And I think he'll agree that performing on his guitar and singing is a form of expression that has a lot of overlap with writing and translating. So that's how I got into it. And eventually you just get more contacts and you submit things to a foundation for support or to a magazine, and then you can get discovered, or you work into a niche, and that's how I got to it. I think the biggest challenge is
that's a lovely description.
Yeah, and I think the biggest challenge of it is not, aside from the technical aspect of doing your work well and being being kept up to date on what's being written and how people write and the styles, is as in all jobs, networking. I'm a freelancer, so you have to be constantly making contacts and going to festivals and trying things out, sending a lot of sample translations to publishers and hope that they'll nibble.
Wonderful. I think that, the musicians, that the comparison of translation and, creating music or, interpreting music, I think that's the first time I've actually thought of it, or, it's a brilliant thought. So thank you for sharing that. And coming to Rodaan, there's a question from Arun here who wants to know that, in these times of trolling, and banning of books, and so what is the kind of, what are the kind of, self-censorship that authors have to sometimes resort to? And have you ever had to do that for yourself? In this, the trolling, where you put something out and...
Can you explain the question again?
No, so I think we'll move on from there because we just have a few minutes. So in fact, we should move on to getting a closing comment from you, Rodaan, about what can we look forward from you as an author in the coming year? Is there something you're working on?
I write just when I have nothing to do. Everything in the daily life is important than writing. Even give the garden water or walking outside, cooking, learning little bit guitar. And because of the lockdown, I have a lot of time to do nothing. Then I am busy with maybe very nice book, because really I have all the time. And this is because when I feel alone, I don't want that feeling. I run away to write. When I write, I make people around me in the page to be not alone. I'm very weak when I'm alone. And this is just writing for me, just to be not alone, not to thinking about to be author or to that people reading me or make a good book.
So thank you, Rodaan, and thank you, Jonathan. I mean, both of you have shared such wonderful stories, and it's been an absolute delight to be in conversation. Maybe, Jonathan, you'd like to say something as we close here. You'd like to wish the audiences from your side, and then we can close this session.
Thank you, Neeta. Well, actually, as coincidence would have it, I'm starting work on Monday on the sequel to Rodaan's book, Two Blankets, Three Sheets. It was a book that he published a couple of years ago, and it's called Holland. I think we're probably going to have a different title in English when it comes out next year. But it follows the same character, Samir Karim, as he now leaves the asylum seeker center with his papers, with his official papers, and tries to integrate into Dutch society. And it's along the same lines as the other book. I'm also going to dictate it. I'm looking forward to that. And there's one quick thing I'll tell you about it so that it'll whet your appetite. What Rodaan was talking about, having a dog. comes back as a theme throughout the book Holland, because as strangely as people will look at you as a foreigner or as an outsider in Holland, as soon as you have a dog, you're one of them. So
That's true.
it's true. So he, in fact, invents having a dog. He only just has a leash and a ball and has this fictitious dog, and goes out, and suddenly everyone from the neighbors till the policeman is his best friend because he's one of them. He's got a dog. So be on the lookout next year for Rodaan Al Galidi's Holland.
That's wonderful news, wonderful news. So thank you, Jonathan, for bringing these stories to us in English. And thank you, Rodaan, for
Thank you
thinking
very
of these
much.
wonderful, wonderful stories. Thank you. And thank you to Jaipur Festival for having us all here in this wonderful, giving us a chance to meet and talk to each other virtually this year. Hopefully we can all meet in person in the coming years. So
Thank you. Thank you.
this has really been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rodaan, Jonathan, and Neeta, for such a fascinating conversation. We'd also like to thank our partners, European Union, for supporting this session, and our celebration partner, Diageo. Thank you all for watching and being a great audience. Do stay logged on to continue to watch with us the series of exciting sessions featuring a stellar list of speakers that have been specially curated for you. As you're aware, the cultural sector has been critically impacted by the pandemic, and while we have braced ourselves to embrace the new normal, we have struggled to ensure that we bring to you a free flow of knowledge and ideas. We would love your support towards Teamwork Arts. Any contribution is welcome. Please tweet using hashtag Jaipur Literature Festival 2021 and tag us at Jaipur Lit Fest. The festival is protected by Dettol. Hope to see you in our other sessions.
समझ अपनी भाषा में ही आता है, कंटेंट आपकी भाषा में ओनली ऑन डेली हंट। हमें पता है आपको क्या चाहिए, अपनी पसंद का कंटेंट ओनली ऑन डेली हंट। रखो अपने एरिया की खबर, लोकल अपडेट्स ओनली ऑन डेली हंट।